Welcome back again to part 16. Last time in Terra Firma I greatly expanded my oil refinery so that I could make high-octane gasoline, the best chemical fuel in the game, and started burning it with liquid oxygen in this combustion generator. This gave me enough power to run 6 very large machines: the large wire factory, the large material press, the large extruder, the large assembler, the large cutter, and this IV assembly line, the gateway to ludicrous voltage, which for this playthrough is the last voltage tier. So now, let's continue. So this episode could very likely be the last episode of the series. We are actually getting quite close to the fusion reactor. The main thing we're going to be working on today are these superconducting coils. In the multi-block itself we need 4, in the computer we need 1, and we need 1 coil in every 2 casing, totaling to about 29 superconducting coils. The superconductor itself doesn't actually matter here. Instead, what matters is the trinium in here. Superconducting coils need 24 ingots of liquid trinium, which is a new fictional element we will have to extract from trinium sulfide, which comes from the dreaded naquadah processing, which we have to do in an LUV chemical reactor. We're gonna need a lot of trinium and a lot of naquadah to make all this trinium, and naquadah is another fictional element, which I believe is canonically element 189. I'm unsure. We have found a little bit of naquadah ore in a plutonium vein, but this is not even close to enough. We'd need this entire crate filled with naquadah ore to even get close to the amount of trinium we need to extract. And that's not even the problem. We have to build all of the processing to turn this naquadah into all of the many byproducts and go down the whole chain. And that's first gonna need a lot of power. I know we've done power expansions literally every episode now, and this episode is no different. So last episode we built this combustion generator, which on its own is about as good as our turbines over here, all 4 of them. These are producing 15 amps of EV power, which is just under 4 amps of IV power, which is how much the combustion generator is making. And its wires burned. Great. I have upgraded this a few times now, and I think it's actually more around 20 amps of EV, which is better than that combustion generator, but it's approaching its upper limit. We can't produce enough nitrobenzene. I could get better rotors and rotor holders, but I think high-octane gasoline is more long-term. I will likely supply the base off of both, and then centralize them into one power grid, but for now we're going to focus on expanding this. The most expensive part of this is IV dynamo hatches, but I usually do work before episodes, and so I made 2 of them, which will get us to 12 amps of IV power, which on its own is probably enough for naquadah processing. So since I said that this series would be coming to an end very soon, I guess I should say what my next plans are. Of course, as of recording this, Silksong's releasing in 2 days. I'll probably have videos out from that by the time this comes out. But also I mentioned GTNH, and I definitely intend to do GTNH. In fact, as time has gone on, I've gotten increasingly excited for that, which you wouldn't expect for something as torturous as GTNH. And that's because I have some very specific plans for that. I will make an announcement video for this, so I don't want to give away too many details right now, but it's gonna be a big series, and it's not just gonna be me. Additionally, with the way I've done that, once I'm done Silksong and GTNH, I could probably move on to Factorio, or if I'm feeling like it, I can do Star Technology, though Flurban is already doing a great series on that. Anyways, we got both the combustion engines running, and so now we have 3 of these. This is 12 amps of IV, making this about as good as the EV grid, but on IV voltage. In other words, we've quadrupled our capacity. This base, again, it's getting so crazy. Oh, and someone did mention something that I had to check out, and it was exactly as insane as they said it was. I can upgrade these maintenance hatches to configurable maintenance hatches, which are normally supposed to let you throttle machines down to save on maintenance. But in the case of a generator, slowing down the machine is actually a good thing, because that means it's using less fuel. And so what I can do here is I can extend the duration by 10%, and then it will decrease maintenance problems by a lot. 0.2 times frequency means, I think, that it'll take 5 times the amount of time for maintenance problems to show up. We don't really worry about them anyways, but we're getting a 10% efficiency boost here. Just for free. Well, not for free, these things did cost HV conveyors, but those are basically free at this point. Anyways, that just is minor fuel efficiency. We already make a lot of high-octane gasoline. Like, this tank is full. But now for Naquita processing. And you know what, this one's too much of a beast for me to explain right now, so I'll let myself do it in voiceover. Thank you, Past Hecuba. Naquita processing is the final and most complicated ore processing chain in any usual GregTech run. Centered around this LCR recipe, it is the main source of enriched Naquita, Naquadria, and most importantly for us, trinium. To start, we make fluoroantimonic acid, a superacid so strong it doesn't even have a measurable pH, and even dissolves most plastics. This is combined with Naquita to break it down into impure enriched Naquita solution and impure Naquadria solution, which I will identify with their in-game symbols and an I for impure. These both need to be centrifuged into their pure forms and as a byproduct give indium phosphide, antimony trifluoride, and trinium sulfide, which is what we're after. But before we can actually turn that into trinium, we need to deal with the purified solutions, which are mixed with sulfuric acid and centrifuged again to give enriched Naquita and Naquadria sulfate, as well as a bunch of waste solution, which has to be recycled with barium and gallium sulfate as extra byproducts. All of these sulfates have to go through extra steps to remove sulfur, and trinium sulfide needs an EBF at over 7,000 degrees Kelvin, which is a temperature I can only achieve with Naquita coils. This meant I needed to use many new LUV components to build my first ever LUV machine, the LUV assembler, and I immediately used this to craft all 16 Naquita coils required for trinium. But this is gonna take a lot of power, so this is why we have all these combustion generators. These new coils reach a maximum heat of 7,200 degrees Kelvin, which I think is more than any real-life element can. But luckily we're not dealing with real-life elements. I think Naquita is canonically element 189, which should decay instantly, but whatever, we don't have to deal with physics, this is block game. And then while we wait for coils to continue crafting, we can get to the factory itself. Right here I have every single machine we'll need, starting with the LCR, which takes up half the chest there. So the large chemical reactor will go towards the corner here, with 2 chemical reactors to make fluoroantimonic acid. This is the center of all the reactions that will be taking place here, and the entire factory will extend from the front of it. Most of our power routing for this factory will be done under, with our main EBF here, taking 2 IV hatches like that, and our main LCR taking power all the way over here. I actually don't currently have enough cable to do that. But you can see this EV transformer is gonna transform, of course, to EV, so we can power these 2 EV centrifuges to take the impure solution and turn it into pure solution. Then since we have those machines in, I might as well get everything else. We're gonna need 2 HV mixers here to take the purified solution and combine it with sulfuric acid. We're gonna need 2 centrifuges to immediately remove the sulfuric acid from that after it's done what it needs to. And then 2 distilleries to take the Naquadria and enriched Naquita waste and recycle it back into the beginning. Also, you may notice I have hunger 2 right now, and that's because I got arsenic poisoning trying to make more superconductor. And while I haven't designed this far, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have an electrolyzer here to handle barium and gallium sulfate from these, and I think that's everything. Also, our Naquita coils are done, meaning we can finally build our most powerful EBF, minus the energy hatches, which take forever to craft. And I can finish up cable routing before we move on to the so fun, definitely never cut out, pipe routing. At this point, the amount of transformers we use is just increasing exponentially. Because some of the machines here are MV, but we're giving the entire factory IV power. Shockingly, I did not blow up a single machine in that process. So it turns out we did not need this entire platform. We have a relatively small Naquita processing factory because we don't have to smelt enriched Naquita, we don't have to smelt Naquadria, and I'm not using distillation towers due to the fact that I simply do not need to recycle most of the waste products. Just got this drill to mine out an entire vanadium magnetite vein. We got 10,000 vanadium magnetite and almost 30,000 regular magnetite. We actually have 2 drills now. One of them is mining Naquita right now. I think I'll set this one on Naquita as well, because we need around 9,000 Naquita ore. And Naquita veins are very small. But yeah, this is now 2.5 weeks after the last recording, because I've been playing Silksong non-stop. I haven't had a second to play TFG in that time. I did get a little bit done before Silksong, as you just saw, but that game has taken over my life, and I have a few videos out by now, but as of recording this I have 14 parts recorded and only 3 released. I haven't given myself time to even edit Silksong either. The game is so good though. Even if you're not interested in Metroidvanias, you might just be interested in watching me play through it, because I absolutely adore the game. It was absolutely worth the wait. I would have waited another 5 years for the same game. In my recording, I am at the end of Act 3. Well, I'm not completely done. I am done enough that I can come back to TFG, and it feels great to be back in this factory. But yeah, I was assembling together Nakoda processing, and also doing a bunch of drilling. We have a ton of Nakoda. If I go downstream here, this is the Nakoda vein we're currently mining. And no, this vein hasn't gotten me 3,000 Nakoda. I brought the same super chest over, so far it's about 400 Nakoda. Unfortunately, this is also under a bunch of Lepidolite and Lapis, and so I've had to mine through there as well. But that means we have thousands of Lepidolite, Borax, and Rock Salt. So we're now importing Nakoda dust. You can't see the bus that it's going into, but it's behind there. And then the titanium trifluoride will go through there, and then we can import that into our titanium factory. So we are now making Impure Enriched Nakoda solution and Naquadria solution, as well as some titanium trifluoride. Since I've filtered all the outputs, I can predict that Naquadria will come out here, and Enriched Nakoda will come out here, and then our titanium trifluoride will go into storage to be managed later. So there, that's centrifuging Naquadria solution, and that's centrifuging Enriched Nakoda. There we go, so our first test run is done now. So this is how we're gonna very slowly go through testing here. If I just let the factory run and solve problems as they come, then we'll work our way through the recipe naturally. So since this has only one fluid output, I don't really have to do any work here. I can just immediately fluid auto output through the front, and that's mixing our acidic solution, and then the acidic solution goes into these centrifuges. Well, this is going very well. The Naquadria sulfate should go through here, and then there's fluorine gas. So fluorine gas is going to be a bit of a weird pipe, because we're going to have to reach that chemical reactor from these two centrifuges, and we can't output through the front. But with just a little bit of quick routing, we have the fluorine going out of there, back into this chemical reactor, meaning we've fully recycled the hydrofluoric acid. I'm falling. We've fully recycled the hydrofluoric acid, and it's going back into the system. So I'm going to grab a little bit more fluorine as a starting buffer, and then that's as much as we'll ever need. The whole system loops itself. So now waste is getting recycled. This will get us barium and gallium phosphide, and I want to auto-output those into this electrolyzer. Because yeah, we're only getting 2 outputs here, and so I can just share an electrolyzer for both of them. And then all of the sulfur and barium and gallium will go into here. I did forget to filter the sulfur though. Look at all the outputs. Okay, and I think the whole system's actually running. Yeah, while I've been designing this, it is running flawlessly. So then, the ultimate test is to see... Yes, 10 trinium sulfide. That's 5 trinium ingots. So I can power up this EBF if I just throw in a little bit of zinc. And that's our most powerful EBF with Nakoda coils, LUV power, and we're making trinium. So this was actually pretty easy to set up since I've actually designed it in a creative world. But a simplified version of this is we're making fluoroantimonic acid in these chemical reactors to make the 2 main solutions, which go down this whole line. Some of their stuff, about 25%, gets recycled back to be mixed into more acidic solution, while all of the byproducts go down this big pipe, all sent out through here. And honestly, this is a lot cleaner than the test factory I made, mostly because we're not dealing with some of the sulfates. Like, in Naquadria and Enriched Nakoda sulfate, I could process into ingots, but we don't need it. Since we're stopping the series at fusion, Enriched Nakoda and Naquadria are completely useless. But yeah, this is now the most power-hungry part of our base. In fact, all of these combustion engines are running. These 2... Ow! Great. These 2 combustion engines alone are being used constantly just to power the EBF in the chemical reactor. So we actually only have the bottom one to spare. and even that is using a lot of its power to handle the other processing. I think one of the best parts of this is all of the byproducts, like indium phosphide means we don't have to worry about stupid indium processing. But after all of that, we've made a whole 12 trinium ingots. We need like 680. Additionally, I need to make a vacuum freezer. And there we go, that's trinium. This is a pretty expensive machine, IV vacuum freezer, but it's only going to be running half the time. But after all that work, we now have an entirely fictional super material. How the quests described this ingot canonically is that it's lighter than aluminum, but 100 times stronger than steel. And so yeah, this is kind of a super material. Also, trinium coils can go up to 9,000 Kelvin. And so yeah, that means trinium just has some insane heat capacity. And that's why we're going to use it in a fusion reactor. We're going to use a lot of it. So why we set up Naquadah processing first is because of how long this takes. I'm going to be constantly supplying this with Naquadah over the next, I think I did the math, 16 hours. It needs to be running constantly at full speed for that amount of time to produce enough trinium for a fusion reactor. So, what we're going to be doing in the meantime is we're going to be working on polybenzimidazole, and we're going to upgrade the base. We need a new area for the fusion reactor, and I want a power substation. But we're already out of Naquadah, so I'm going to begin my first refilling trip. Hold on, what? 9,000 Naquadah! 9,000! How huge was this vein? It's completely gone already. I've only had this drill for like 5 minutes. Okay, we're gonna take the plutonium as well, and the poor Naquadah. I think this is enough for the fusion reactor already. But yeah, I did the math. It was about 8,600 Naquadah to extract that much trinium, so now it's a matter of waiting. It's gonna be like 16 hours. What on earth? There's a name tag here. The Arnians are back! They just don't die! Did he pick up the crate? Yeah, he just picked up the entire conglomerate line. There's the crate. How did they get here already? Oh no, they're at world spawn, aren't they? They just don't die. Okay, so we've successfully stopped an Arnian attack. I'll have to go find them and blow them up again. Okay, but we now have 9,000 Naquadah ore, which we're gonna very slowly process here. And then we also have the poor raw Naquadah, which can also be put through these macerators, and then that will come out to be, I think, around 15,000 Naquadah. So now with this done, let's move on to our next major LUV chemical processing chain, polybenzimidazole. This is going to be now the most complex polymer of the entire playthrough. Made from diphenyl isophthalate and diaminobenzidine, going down huge crafting chains. This one is once again too much of a beast for me to explain, but that last voiceover took 3 days to make. So, we're just gonna take it one step at a time as I build it. So the very first step for polybenzimidazole is all the way at the bottom here. There's dimethylbenzene, which can be made with 2 methane and 1 benzene, but that's going to use a lot of our methane and benzene, and while we have a lot of methane, I like turning that into hydrogen, and our benzene is currently also running the power grid, so it's not ideal. A better way to do this would be to distill wood tar. Now, we're already doing this for benzene, but we only get the benzene output. If we switch to a distillation tower, we'll get phenol, dimethylbenzene, toluene, and creosote, and it's about time we upgraded to this old MV system. So we're not changing the extractors at all, just these 3 distilleries into 2 HV distillation towers. This is probably not something I should get into a habit of doing, just shoving factories into tight spaces like this, but hey, it works. And so this is it. We've replaced our MV distilleries with distillation towers, and now we're making creosote, phenol, toluene, and dimethylbenzene as a byproduct of our already existing benzene factory. So this is just an upgrade. We make the same amount of benzene, just a bunch of byproducts. So now we can work on polybenzimidazole itself, from now on referred to as PBI, because that is a mouthful. Now, we only need 24 ingots of PBI for the entire fusion reactor, and maybe a little bit for quality of life along the way. And so there is no point in us building a whole factory for it, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a series of new large chemical reactors along here with all the circuits we need, and then maybe a few repeat circuits if they're particularly slow. And simple as that, 2 more LCRs, and so PBI is now just a matter of auto-crafting. So we have our main PBI recipe here, and then we'll automate diphenyl isophthalate with these recipes, and then we'll automate diaminobenzidine with these recipes. And so now we can test one PBI recipe. I have never auto-crafted with liquids to this extent before. This is my first time playing GregTech on a modern version. This looks so cursed. And it's so much easier too. I can just watch it go. I have no chemical processing chain that I stayed up at night for 8 hours to build. But for the whole fusion reactor, we only need 3 of these recipes, so this is actually a third of the PBI needed for a fusion reactor. So yeah, we really don't need to do this a lot, which is why we don't have anything like the epoxy factory. Like, in the moment, I was a bit annoyed that I decided to do the whole epoxy factory when I could auto-craft it, but in the end, this has been very nice because every circuit board uses epoxy. And so this is just sitting here making all my epoxy. And since this stuff is actually so cheap, I think I will start replacing a few recipes, namely the blank pattern recipe, because this is insane. With PBI complete and the trinium factory slowly burning through our 15,000 naquita, there's almost nothing left to stop me from building a fusion reactor, apart from the colossal weight for trinium. So for this weight, it is time to begin the final base expansion. With our technology, a lot of new tools have been unlocked for building, like the titanium building wand, which can do this. And more importantly, I've gained the ability to copy and paste with this handy tool. While it isn't perfect, this will allow a speed of building comparable to creative mode, meaning I can finally construct the final evolution of this TFG base, and build a room for our penultimate goal, the fusion reactor.
It's time for part 2.
So I am once again here, voicing over a huge time lapse. This one was not supposed to be as long as it is. The original idea was just to get a quick building on top of my roof, which I had allowed for when I originally built the building, because I knew I wanted a specific room for my fusion reactor. But then it turns out that building doesn't really look great, and so it needs some stuff to the side, and the only good way to do that was to add 2 extra buildings, and then, oh, you know what, I want to build Gothic. And so I wasted like 50 hours designing a huge Gothic thing that I could barely build with my resources. Like, those lamps were about as difficult as LUV circuits to make for some reason, because they need like sulfuric acid and glowstone. You can see though, as I'm clearing the roof though, I start using TNT, which goes horribly wrong. I cut it out completely, but that blew up my epoxy factory, and I just didn't repair it, because I don't need epoxy anymore, but it also blew up my air distillation, which was quite annoying, so I had to put that back together. But now we're getting a new roof, and this is just because I needed to put something on top. This build has been really fun to put together. It's the first time I've really just sat down and tried to use everything I've learned about Gothic architecture to make it look good like this, and I'm very proud of it. I'm using a ton of deep slate, TFG calls it migmatite, and that is thanks to my rock breakers. I got a line of 6 of them in my basement, just producing a ton of different rocks. Mixed in, there's also a few basalt columns. Those have to be manually carved out in the beneath. That was a good 3 hours of collecting. But yeah, this whole time I was just sick, which is why it's such a long time lapse. Like, I just had nothing else I could do. It was just editing Silksong videos and building in TFG. And I can hear the Silksong music right now. I love that game. Well, the base is finally done, and this thing looks amazing. There are 2 problems with it right now. There is, of course, the perfect symmetry on the front here. That's moved over just 1 block, and I don't want to rebuild this entire front building, so... And then also, less noticeably, this building, we can count the roof here, there's 8 blocks here, but then on this building, there's only 7 blocks here, which means that that building is 1 block further, but it's not noticeable. I don't know how. By some miracle, it isn't noticeable. But yeah, this has been a very expensive project, actually. Things like this locometal is actually made mostly of steel,
I need to turn steel blocks into 24 locometal pillars, which I did at this saw by the river. But there was a lot of locometal. I think in the entire build there was around 2.5 thousand locometal pillars. And then there's just every single kind of migmatite. We have migmatite pillars, we have migmatite brick slabs, we have migmatite tiles, polished migmatite pillars being used as floors, we have layered migmatite, we have framed blocks with migmatite in them. I used so much of that stuff. It's literally just deep slate though, and that's why it looks so good. And all of that is being produced by two LV rock crushers. Yeah, the base is looking amazing, and this is our final form. And I have built a room for the fusion reactor right here. We got a big glowy chandelier up there, rainbow lighting on the floor, and this is built in a circle to mimic the shape of what a fusion reactor would be if I had one here. So this room is built specifically for a fusion reactor. And so you may be wondering, what's the progress on that? Well, this factory isn't running because I cut off its Naquita supply. We have 969 trinium. That's 1.5 fusion reactors. I could make another one. We actually have an insane amount of trinium. I don't know what to do with all of this. But each ingot takes about 16 seconds to melt, and there's 600 ingots, and so we're gonna start melting it all now. So we'll just make exactly 100 buckets, because why not? That's gonna take forever though. So another thing I built up here is this middle floor, and you can see I've cleared out an area in the middle for a multi-block. And the multi-block I want to make is a substation. This is a little 5x5 battery buffer that can be filled with any kind of capacitor, and capacitors can be filled with any crystal battery, specifically crystal batteries, which makes things very difficult because we can't do an LUV capacitor then, because the LUV crystal battery needs a ZPM assembly line. I guess I can technically do that. Oh, but it also needs europium, which needs a fusion reactor. And then the IV Lapatronic capacitor is possible, but very annoying. We would have to make the equivalent of 4 sets of quantum suits to do that, and I just don't want to. So we're actually going to go with the lowest level EV Lapatronic capacitors, but those still store 150 million EU, which compared to the battery that's in them, 25 million EU, that's a lot. And with 18 of those, that is actually more than this IV battery buffer, which is a good thing because we're going to be running some LUV machines. But this substation will finally centralize our power grid. And as our base continues to get more and more powerful, these types of things get pretty easy. So we now have all of the palladium substation, laminated glass, EV Lapatronic capacitors, and most expensively, the energy hatches, and a 64 amp IV substation dynamo hatch. This thing looks kind of insane. And I'm doing 64 amps because I want it to be able to run a fusion reactor. Or at least start a fusion reactor. So we're gonna get the EV input and the IV input in there. And then I think we'll have IV output immediately to the side of that. Maintenance goes on the back. And then from there we just get our substation base finished. And then stack up all 18 of these Lapatronic capacitors, getting us a total of 2.7 billion EU storage, and then simply cover that all up. But yeah, that was very easy. And then using all of our IV superconductor, we can connect this up to our main grid, which will get these combustion engines running for quite a while. I'm just gonna make sure that this doesn't blow up my system. I don't think it will. There we go, all 3 of them. Oh, look at that. That's cool. And then, somewhat confusingly, we are actually going to use the same kind of wire for the EV line, just because uranium triplatinum is kind of expensive. I don't like doing uranium enrichment. And then right here gives us 64 amps of IV at our disposal. That's 16 amps LUV. Wait, this thing can output an amp of UV if I transformed it. These machines. That is so much power. We're gonna need it though. And we're gonna need it for our next step in building a fusion reactor. Because trinium was actually only one part of the huge cost of the fusion reactor, and that's covering the superconducting coils. But outside of the fusion casing, there's also all of these energy hatches. We need a total of 16 LUV energy hatches. So the LUV energy hatch once again has to be scanned, and then we put the data in an assembly line. Oh no. Okay, this gets nasty pretty quickly. We need an osmiridium coil here, and actually that seems like the only really bad part. So for the osmiridium coils, I've done a little bit of reworking on the network to get an LUV ABS. And I might actually get a second ABS now, because we need HSSS. Okay. I'm using so many acronyms here, I feel bad. Okay, so we need HSSS, this. We need Ruridit, we need indium tin barium titanium cuprate, we need samarium iron arsenic oxide, we need a lot of things, so I'm probably gonna get a second ABS. So here we're gonna make an absolutely insane amount of osmiridium, which is actually gonna take like hours to go through. And this will probably be one of the most difficult alloys we make. Not just because the amount we just put in there is like the entire US annual supply times 10 amount of osmium, but also because its temperature is so high, we need an LUV alloy blast smelter with HSSG coils. This is just going to be running forever now. But that's all for the fine osmiridium wire for the energy hatches, and we need 16 whole energy hatches. I think there's a way I could make the fusion reactor to lower the amount of energy hatches, but I've always made them with 16 energy hatches, and so I'm just not gonna change, and I'm gonna put the effort in for this. I've also been working on HPICs, and additionally, I finished scanning an IV energy hatch to get the data for an LUV energy hatch, and so we can stick that in there. Create a recipe for the LUV energy hatch and the LUV coil, and then distribute them among all of our many machines. And now I'm done all the naquita and osmium we need to make more naquita coils for our second alloy blast smelter. We're gonna make this alloy blast smelter LUV as well, because that can run a lot more recipes and run them faster. And since we're not using this factory anymore, we can actually just take all these naquita coils and put them to good use on an alloy blast smelter. And so just like that, we've now doubled our smelting capability. But the cool thing about naquita coils is that they are 1800 degrees hotter than HSSG coils, and that actually means that we gain a perfect overclock. All this basically means is all recipes that we could do in here will be twice as fast in here. And then as a first test for this ABS, we're gonna make tungsten steel, one of the most commonly used alloys in our base right now. And there we go. The difference is quite visible. This is white hot. 3 seconds for 2 ingots. That's 1.5 seconds per tungsten steel ingot. That is wild. And now with all of that out of the way, we would be able to craft these energy hatches, but I believe we're out of crafting space. Yep, our largest CPU is 8K. That's a 9K recipe. I guess I'm just gonna build a big computer now. Additionally, while I make that computer, let's actually do the superconducting coils. Or the superconducting part of it. We need indium tin barium titanium cuprate, and that much superconductor is going to be very expensive. How expensive, you may be asking? Well, this expensive. We're going to be dumping our entire supply of indium and barium right into this blast furnace, and over the course of a few hours, this is going to turn into all of the superconducting wire we need for those superconducting coils. Niobium titanium's also getting finished up here, as I'm producing a ton of niobium and titanium. And again, everything just seems to be waiting right now. We just need to process through resources, which is why I've upgraded so many machines to LUV. This isn't going to take very long. There's just not going to be a lot of interesting stuff along the way, so there's going to be a lot of cuts. So to give you an idea of what's happening right now, we need fusion machine casing, which needs LUV casing, LUV pumps, and iridium neutron reflectors. This needs ruridit and tungsten carbide, this needs a whole load of HSSS, and this needs a whole load of LUV superconductor. And all of those things are made in the ABS, so the fusion machine casing is just a very long waiting game. Then since we're using fusion glass on the edges, this will also need to be made. That needs a ton of naquita made in regular EBFs, and a lot more iridium neutron reflectors, which means more tungsten carbide, more ruridit. And lastly, the fusion computer needs UHPICs and IV field generators. This needs the ABS, and this needs a whole lot of chemical processing. And so, to save you from that, through the power of editing, we can make all of the basic components. This took a good 15 hours. But over here we have everything for fusion glass. Over here we have almost everything for the fusion casing. We have the energy hatches sitting there, and then we have our current worry, which is the fusion computer. I also have this crate filled with literally everything for the superconducting coils. And don't worry about, like, missing out on things. It was literally just me sitting AFK next to the ABSs, occasionally auto-crafting items. I did get a new Silksong speedrunning PB while doing that, though. But now I can just stick all these items into the interface one at a time. Oh, I did forget the UHPICs. I have the wafers, but I have to cut them first. These are another new thing. They are the best PIC in the game, and they needed liquid nakoda, but that was just a matter of waiting, like everything else here. Really can't catch a break. Guess we're making a new cutter, but I'm pretty sure this won't throw anything stupid at us. Yeah, HSSE is not really concerning. But yeah, look at that. Like, our base is so powerful. To give you an idea, we have 7,000 platinum, 4,000 palladium, 7,000 nickel. Like, these three things just 2 episodes ago would be crazy to get. 5,000 silver. Like, nickel has been a problem for most of the playthrough, and now we have more nickel than copper. There's just things like that. Everything's in the thousands now. We can autocraft whatever we want. And then in the meantime, let's start those coils, because we have a little bit to get through. Oh, these are much faster. I swear superconducting coils took forever to craft. But yeah, we're gonna have this crate just conveyor things into there, and then we're gonna have 28 superconducting coils. We need 24 to make the casing, and then just 4 for the reactor itself. For the final phase of crafting, we are actually going to move this IV transformer into the clean room. It's doing step down right now. I don't want that. Oh. Oh no. GregTech has decided to leave me with a parting gift. No, not the filter casing as well. I'm pissed. I'm actually pissed. Missing 8. Of course you're missing 8 because the saw that actually makes that is over here. Okay, how many parts of my base have I blown up in the last little bit? Like, there's the epoxy factory. This base is not gonna make it to the end of the series. I said GregTech has left me a parting gift. I'm gonna be playing GTNH after this. This is only the beginning. We've now moved these 2 machines in here. Really sloppy, but whatever. I still don't have filter casing. And then we can start cutting these UHPICs, except no, we can't. I have to fix up the clean room first, and then let it clean, which will take 5 minutes. Okay, now the clean room's working again, so we are actually making UHPICs. And because I overlooked this before actually doing the magic of editing, now I have to sit here and wait even longer, except on recording this time, which means I can't listen to the Silksong OST. Torture. Well, since this is clearly gonna take a very long time, there's something I want to do, as this is clearly gonna be the final episode now. And it's to do a full base tour. I have been on this world for over a year now, since I think the end of July 2024. And this is not where it all started. This is where we started. So a lot of comments I got on my first video is that my spawn was crazy good. No, it was not. So a lot of people like ask for the world seed because they want this crazy seed, but this is awful. There is no copper anywhere. There's a tiny magnetite vein. I couldn't have even known that. All I knew is that there was chert, and I knew that chert was terrible. And also, this is highlands. This is just awful. The rainfall is a little bit higher than where I actually settled, so there is a bit more clay. But other than that, this is the worst thing ever. What you don't notice in episode 1, because I cut it out, is that I spent, I think, around 40 minutes just wandering around. I think I went through 2 full days in-game before I eventually swam all the... Oh, it's lagging. Swam all the way downstream to here, and this is where the base began. Unfortunately, it really isn't in a great state, and I'm not in the mood to fill in such a large crater. And we spent a lot of time here. The place burned down maybe about 3 times, but we used to have a crucible, our iron anvil was there, and I did, like, I think over 250 blooms one episode.
It's just the amount of forging in early game used to be crazy. I say used to be because they've changed it a lot, and you can even do bloom automation pretty early on. But then came the bridge, and then the steam age base, and this was just a little grass pad. I did not know how the factory was going to go at that point. I was thinking of kind of lawn basing. I was thinking I'd just get a bunch of like flat pads like this and then just put glass roofs in the sky. I am so glad I didn't, because this is the coolest thing I've ever built. But yeah, eventually we moved all our create stuff, we moved all of our forging. I actually still sometimes use this forge. For example, probably one of the most recent things is this knife. Perfectly forged red steel knife. And then our LV base, which is gone. I dismantled it. But a lot of the things from that era are still here in the crates. At least the less valuable things. Oh, our TFC chest. Luckily our MV line still exists, but this is not really the form it was originally. Most of the machines have been replaced, and also it got dismantled earlier today by a robber. But yeah, nostalgia over. Time for the actual tour. Everything's centered around this AE2 system. I said this when we made it in episode 10, this AE2 system is the center of everything. If this energy acceptor were broken, the series would end, because I would not be able to access all of my items. We have so much stuff. Literally 50,000 sulfur, 30,000 magnetite. We actually have a bunch of Noquadria and enriched Noquita sulfate. Just a scroll through here gives you an idea of how much we've produced over the playthrough. Then our HV line, which is mostly just spam machines that were hooked up to AE2. I'm actually surprised it didn't get taken down because it was kind of scuffed. And then the passive lines began. Our Gabbro processing still exists, apparently. We have air centrifuging here. This was a very quick factory to put together, and I don't even think it works right now. Oh, yeah, it does. Then polyethylene. No, this is polyvinyl chloride. This is polyethylene. But we put the factories together. These things are very important. Kind of just glossed over them when I built them, but they are some of the most important factories in the base because we use so much of that stuff. Styrene, butadiene, rubber. This changed the entire playthrough. Every recipe was waiting like 20 minutes for rubber, and then we got this, and there's no more wait. This saltwater electrolysis factory that you can't really see has produced more hydrogen and chlorine than anything else in the entire playthrough, not even close. Diorite factory hasn't worked since the update, but all of its super chests have, and so these are still full, except for aluminum. I've turned all of our aluminum into ingots. Then here's our main power plant, the oldest part of the base still standing, probably. We take our many kapok trees, turn it into a ton of logs, and then burn those all into wood tar. Any charcoal gets turned into more wood tar in these extractors, and then we distill them up there in the new distillation setup. Since this was originally built, the main upgrade has actually been this nitrobenzene setup, which was supposed to be temporary, sort of a test system, and then it ended up being good enough to power the entire base and hasn't faltered since I built it. Ore processing is probably the most used part of the base. This is sort of a routine thing I do constantly. I'll just pick a chest from George Orwell here. Let's do some scheelite. We're getting a bit low on tungsten. So here we have 1.6 thousand scheelite, and we can choose to put it into 2 crates here. These macerators are meant to crush crushed ores into dust, and so if I had crushed ores, I'd put it in here. But because this is pour ores, we put it in this crate, and then clean out anything that may be stuck in there. And there we go. This is just going to start producing a ton of scheelite again. Eventually that'll make its way through storage into these chemical baths and make us some tungsten. And these are the type of background processes I keep talking about. There's a lot of chores that happen this late into a Greg Tech playthrough, and that's how I'm able to get so many resources. I mean, this is maybe 16 different drill runs. I actually have my drill at a platinum vein right now. Mined a bunch of cooperite, which is now being turned into platinum group elements. Yeah, continuing the tour, here's our platinum group sludge factory. I'm not going to explain how this works, I don't have the time for that. Go watch the video where I built it. Then we have what's left of the epoxy factory. Unfortunately, the epichlorohydrin chemical reactor was blown up when building the base, but everything else works, and we have a large enough buffer of epoxy that it's not a problem. Next to that, we have our 2 distillation setups. Liquid air distillation, this is the most important because it gives us our oxygen and nitrogen. This system works by taking biomass from the pyrolyze oven, which takes plant balls from this sugarcane factory, though I don't even know if this works anymore. Yeah, it broke at some point, and we just didn't really need it, I guess. We should be needing it for the next part of the tour here, our second power plant. This is producing 12 amps of IV power through all of these combustion engines. This is the most reliable part of the power grid, because it doesn't need, like, turbine durability and stuff. And our high-octane gasoline chemical line has been very reliable. As oil processing has expanded and we got wood tar distillation, all the problems that it used to have since fixed themselves. Then we have the clean room, which, oh, hey, finished the UHPICs, I'll get to that soon. Some of our oldest machines are actually in here, like this packer, which still makes all of our 2X wire. And these HV machines, we still actually have a circuit assembler here, it makes our AE2 components. And then we have a laser engraver that still makes all of our wafers, because apparently you don't need better than HV. Side note, the fusion machine casing is now crafting since this is working. This tour is actually going to take longer than the fusion reactor, I think. But yeah, apart from that, there's only a small few passive factories. Like here, we turn zinc sulfide into zinc and sulfur. Zinc sulfide coming from that system, but we no longer need it. This is a hydrogen factory. I don't know if I mentioned this, but it takes methane and water and makes a hydrogen and CO2, I think. And this is the best source of hydrogen in the game. It's currently being kept with a level emitter to keep our hydrogen at 10,000 buckets, but this has been very nice, and I'm actually using it to produce a bunch of deuterium for when our fusion reactor actually works. So that's top floor, that's the passive floor. Then the bottom floor, this is on demand, auto crafting. This MV line was going to be very ambitious. I was going to get a bunch of power infrastructure to line up hundreds and hundreds of machines. Turns out we only needed extruders for a short time, and then after that it's kind of been in a sad state. Same with this HV line. We only have 5 machines, and we don't even need them really. The EV line has been surprisingly much larger than I expected. Not large, but just larger than I expected. Smelting array goes here. I've switched out the fluid outputs to be P2P tunnels because this allows teleportation of fluids from the ABS straight to the vacuum freezer, and that means I don't need to worry about pipes melting and stuff. But yeah, this smelting array is pretty good. I probably could have made it a little bit better to minimize the AFK in the end game, but whatever. Then the large machines. Large machines have been great, even though they're only IV. Normally in a playthrough I actually start them at LUV, but these can just fly through recipes. For example, if I want some steel plates, go like that. Boom, 48 steel plates. Don't know what I'd need them for though. This assembler probably shouldn't have put everything onto it. Like when I'm making energy hatches, this thing gets very stuck. But these days, since we have the LUV assembler handles more of the slower recipes, and this can just blaze through things. And then finally, the forgotten floor, the passive floor. Wait, no, the top floor is the passive floor. Wait, no, this is the passive floor. That's the chemical floor. I have my names straight, trust me. This entire floor is quiet right now because this factory, titanium factory, needs rutile or titanium trifluoride, but we don't produce either anymore. This would need wrought iron to make steel, but I'm pretty sure we're out of cast iron ingots, and this would need aluminum dust, but we don't have aluminum dust. All of these are locked with level emitters, and so they're not currently running, but they're a good backbone to the base. I just expected this to get a lot larger than it did. But yeah, finally at the top of the base, it's time to build our fusion reactor. Let's finish off this series. So the first thing to craft right now will be the fusion computer. I've had all the items sitting in my inventory for the whole tour, so I can throw those all together, and in 40 seconds we will have the control computer. Fusion casing is actually done, because I activated that assembler while we were touring, and so that means we can immediately move on to fusion glass. Fusion glass is probably one of the most important parts of the fusion reactor, not because it serves any specific purpose, but because it lowers the amount of fusion machine casing we need. Just a quick PSA, please use fusion glass. It shows that it's not in the multi-block preview, but if you go to the fusion reactor, click this button, you'll see the version with the fusion glass, and you need way less fusion casing. This is much easier because without the fusion glass, you need 1,000 trinium. But fusion glass is mainly expensive through the iridium neutron reflectors, which I got around by just mining a bunch of beryllium and tin. And so we can throw that all in, and we'll have 32 fusion glass. And so now finally, with that done, we can build the last multi-block. We start with the circle of fusion casing here. This stuff contains superconducting coils, and so it'll use magnetic fields to compress the deuterium and tritium we are going to put in here. The combined pressure and temperature from this is enough to fuse the deuterium and tritium together into helium plasma, which we can utilize for power generation. These main superconducting coils here will be directly powered by our LUV energy hatches. We only need to use 1 or 2 of these, and I chose to do 16 of them just because it lowers the cost of the fusion casing. And so now finally we can top off this fusion reactor, and then grab some fuel and start it up. So deuterium is an isotope of hydrogen we can make by centrifuging hydrogen gas, and deuterium can be centrifuged again to get another isotope, tritium gas. I have a barrel of both of these. We can input them both into the fusion reactor, and then hook this thing up to power and charge it up to 160 million EU. And there we have it. I've now started an actual fusion reaction in Minecraft's most realistic mod, making me superior to humanity. What the hell was that? What? My factory!